So welcome to today's experience of Hope Starts Here. We're walking together as a church every day in connection with each other and in connection with our friend Jesus as we move towards Easter. And we have a candle that's lit that reminds us He is the light of the world. He is our hope. And now today, we want to look at a remarkable statement about Jesus, a remarkable part of who He is. From John the Baptist, Jesus is our forgiver. But let's start by stilling our minds for just a moment. You might close your eyes if you want to. And breathe in hope. And breathe out fear. And breathe in grace. And breathe out guilt. In the first chapter of John, we're told that John the Baptist sees Him coming and says, "Look, behold, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world." Sin is a world that the Bible takes real seriously. We don't talk about it a lot in our day as a culture, but we can never get away from thinking about whether or not somebody is a good person. And we'll have other words for people. Jerk is a word that gets used in place of sinner a lot in our days. Or there's cruder words that I won't use here, but that get to that sense that we all have that to be a good person matters immensely. And what keeps us from that is what the Bible calls sin. One of the ways to think about it is this. A man named Neil Plantinga writes that there is a way that things are supposed to be in life. Parents are to love their children, and children are to honor their parents. People are to keep their wedding vows to one another. Racism should not exist. Sexism should not exist. People ought to be honest. People ought to be trustworthy. People ought to share. There shouldn't be greed. And the biblical word for all of this, when things are the way that they're supposed to be, when God's will is being done on earth as it is in heaven, is shalom. Shalom is when the world is governed by moral beauty and justice. And the violation of shalom, the culpable violation of shalom, that is sin. You can't understand sin unless you understand shalom. And when you see how good shalom can be, you see what a problem sin is. Other forms of suffering happen to us, but sin happens in us. Sin deforms us. And so Jesus wants to take sin away. He wants to remove from us guilt. But it's not just that. It's not just that, we all want to get out of trouble with God. We need to be saved from sin itself, not just the consequences of sin. So you might ask today, where does sin have a hold of my life? And I promise it's in there somewhere. A friend of mine was dating somebody recently. It was a first date. And she asked him, "Tell me about your flaws. Tell me about your weaknesses." And no kidding, his response was, "Oh, I wish you hadn't asked me that on my first date. I'm one of the very few people in the world. I'm actually a saint. I don't have flaws. I have stopped sinning." Do I need to tell you there was not a second date? One of the things that John says in a letter written sometime after his gospel is, if we claim we have no sin, the truth is not in us. But if we confess our sin, He is faithful and just to forgive us our sin and cleanse us. You can't walk any place right now, walk past a coffee shop or a restaurant without seeing people wiping down and disinfecting. We do that with our bodies. What about our souls? Well, that's what Jesus does. He is the great cleanser. And we see Him as the one who takes away sin. And we love this about Him, His grace. And we follow Him in confession and forgiveness. So do that today. I'll see you tomorrow.